is just get a chance to know each other. I know some of you know each other and some of you really don't. And when I get a chance to see where everybody's from. So, and today the format we're going to use together is I have sort of a progression we'll take us through, but it's going to be not a lot. It's going to be an interactive session, and it's good. We're going to get a chance to get into some partnerships and share your thinking back out with the whole group, and we'll go in and out of small and whole group quite a bit, and it'll be informal enough that I hope that you'll stop me and ask questions, and you certainly can use the chat if you want. I'll have you do both, and it won't feel like a formal. It shouldn't feel, if I do my job, like a big formal keynote or something like that. This should really feel like a learning session for all of us to sort of dig into a topic together. What I'd like to start with, if you could go to the next slide, is just for you to think for a minute. Like, you had lots of things you could have done on a Saturday morning. We all have busy lives, and so why did you on this Saturday morning decide that you were going to spend the 90 minutes or so with this in this session? And just take a second and jot it down. And I hope grab a sheet of paper or a notebook, or maybe you can do it on your computer. But just take a quick minute and quietly to yourself, and just say, what brought you here today? So what I'm going to do in a second is ask Andrea to put us in the partnerships. And when you get to your partner, I want you to do a couple of things. One is introduce yourself if you don't know the person you're with. And then say a little bit about what brought you here today. And then the other thing I'd like you to do is, we did this in my office earlier this week. We did a little scavenger hunt, but we're not going to do a full scavenger hunt. But I would like you to look around your office or your room or the kitchen you're in, and pick an object that sort of symbolizes how you're feeling right now. And you can be really loose with this. An example might be, like I told Andrea earlier, I have this pack of gum here, and one of the things that I've been working on is trying to make things sticky, make things not just flow in and out of my head, because I feel like I'm always multitasking. So one thing that might symbolize the way I want to be this morning, or I am this morning, is sticky. Anyway, that's an example. Just get in your partnerships, share what brought you here today, and introduce yourself. And pick an object and just share, how it symbolizes how you're feeling at the moment. What questions do you have about what we're going to do?
Peter, and how long do you want me to close the rooms? How long was
let's say about 4 minutes.
Okay, I'll time it. Okay, everybody, off to your rooms you go. Peter, are you in a room too or no?
It'd be good if I'm not in a room, I think. That way, yeah.
Okay, then, okay.
So what I'd like to do is just maybe have each pair just quickly share out where you're from, who you are, and what brought you, just maybe one highlight of what brought you all here today. So anyone can start, any pair can start.
Well, I'll volunteer. Why not? Pera and I were kind of laughing because we said, well, we're here for the obvious reasons that we decided to organize it, right? But taking that aside, and I think we both coincided that we're here because we believe that it's important to create community and to have a space, assigned once a month where you connect with people and you share experiences, and just that's important. It's just sharing what everyone is going through, and it's just that belief is what makes you take a Saturday off, and instead of, I don't know, doing something else, it's just giving yourself time to connect. That's important. And I think Pera agree with me, right, Pera? You're muted. Pera, your microphone.
Sorry, I always forget that. Yeah, absolutely, it's an opportunity to make our communities grow. Creating this synergy in between New Edulite and Collaborative Classroom and Whole School International. It's just a way of enlarging and enriching the community.
Thank you. And it really out in our room, Nigel, that was something that you talked about as well, just the importance of sort of connecting with colleagues, correct?
Your
You're still on
microphone
mute.
is muted too, Nigel.
That's right, and just learning from everybody else. I mean, I think it's very exciting. Hi.
So what's another partnership that what did you talk about?
So, hi everybody, I'm Pat, and I was in partnership with Edgar, who lives in, like you, Peter, one of my very favorite places in the world, which is Monterrey.
Yeah.
And so we've talked a lot about that beautiful city. And Edgar told us a little bit about his school and what he does there. And he is the instructional coach at the Colegio Cambridge. And we talked about how important that work is to help teachers grow and how we might develop a relationship, Edgar and I, because it's, you know, where I live too. I work also with Collaborative Classroom, but I have to say that there's only one word. I wish I had been more noble and broad-minded like Peta and Gabriela, but I had only one word for coming, and that one word is Peter.
Well, thank you.
You'll see. He's just our dream. And my object was this little sparkly wand. You see, can you see how it goes like that? And when I felt on Saturday morning, and I never like to get up early, but I was happy and all sparkly to get up and join Peter today and all my colleagues in Latin America, whom I love and adore. I've been to all of your countries and had a chance to work with so many teachers in Latin America that, of course, I would get up and come join you today. Sparkling.
Thank you, Pat.
Yes. So, well, and I think I'm here because I want to be more helpful for my teachers. And I thought that being here would be great for me because I would learn a lot from you all. So, and my object is this one because this is how I feel. I feel cool here. I have it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Edgar. What about another partnership?
Well, I can talk. Good morning again to everybody.
morning.
I was matched with Heather. My name is Katie Scanlon. I work in San Jose, Costa Rica. I'm originally from upstate New York. And I get up on Saturdays. I haven't been here in a while because we've been reopening the school. So I'm happy to be back, but I wanted to be here to spend some time talking and thinking about teaching and learning again.
Yeah.
Because we've been so flooded with logistics and protocols and all of those things that this feels like a relief to be with educators talking about teaching and learning.
Excellent. Yeah.
And I'll turn it over to Heather.
But Katie, would you mind telling us your school?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm at the Blue Valley School.
Blue Valley. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Heather Moomey. I am living in St. Louis, Missouri right now. I have taught internationally in Mexico and in Europe, and I am a world languages teacher and coordinator for my district. It's called Clayton School District. Pretty cool district because we start teaching languages in first grade, and it's a public school, which doesn't often happen, and we've been doing it almost 30 years. So I've been back in the classroom since October. And I am so excited to be here to learn from my international counterparts. I missed that. And just to really learn and grow every chance I get. I know that this is such a wonderful group, and I see myself in the future going back to international teaching. So wow. I'm just thrilled to be here. So, and my thought was Grogu. Because I feel like because of the way things have had to come up, I wanted to share this with Katie and everybody that I'm on a cart and I go into 15 different classrooms because of the way we have to be socially distanced. So I can give you a teacher's perspective, and then I teach virtually 3 other classes. So I teach 18 classes a week to little children, and I kind of feel like I'm being pulled around like little baby Yoda, floated in my egg. So excited to learn from you all.
Heather, this may you don't know this, but I've spent an enormous amount of time in Clayton with the Clayton schools. Yeah, so I did a lot of work, mostly elementary, but and then it's been a while. It's been probably 6 or 7 years, but I do a lot
thought
of
you
work in
looked
St.
familiar.
Louis. Yeah, no, I've really been in Clayton a lot. So anyway, thank you. Thanks for
All
coming.
right, awesome.
What about another group?
I'll share. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I was with Mariel this morning that we know each other from previous work, which I was really exciting. It's always exciting knowing someone new, but knowing, having the chance of talking to someone that you know is always amazing. You kind of know someone in a different layer. And the reason why I'm here is, like Pat said, Peter, I'm just thrilled to listening to you again, learning more. And the object that I chose is one of my mirrors. I want to be a reflection of what I learned today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Hi, I would like to say hello. And well, first of all, apologize because I was a little bit late. But as Hilma said, we had a chance to be together. I am Mariel from Colegio Williams in Mexico City, a big, huge, enormous fan of you, Peter, of Pat, of course, and the new EduLight group that brought us into this wonderful group. So as I was telling Hilma, I am here because, of course, I'm always interested in keeping up. And what happens during the week is that sometimes certain meetings get extended, and as much as I want to be in workshops, sometimes it is hard. But Saturday is a day for me, and that's why I'm here. And I'm not working in the regular place that I use, but I ran to the kitchen and I found this. It is a pin for the Crocs that I have neglected putting back where it belongs, but so it will keep whatever I learn from today like fresh, and I will try to land it as soon as possible throughout the week.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for coming. And it's funny, you're not going to believe that this is like it's like the particles are all coming together. But I actually, on my phone yesterday, sometimes the iPhone, it brings up like memories, like old photos from other times. And so all my photos from Colegio Williams came up just yesterday. And it was the craziest thing. And that's one of my favorite, I love that school. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. We love you.
All right, and I think we have a couple more. I don't know if you can either put it in the chat or unmute if you want. If anyone else, any other partnerships wants to share. Okay, well, thank you all for coming, and we really appreciate you doing. You probably wonder, like, well, why do you spend so much time? We only have 90 minutes. Why are we spending this much time at the beginning, sort of getting to know each other? And I think one of the things that will become apparent as we talk today, and I think it's probably not any news to you, that when we think about rigorous thinking, we think about deep thinking, we think about intellectual thinking, about intellectual development, it's really impossible to do that work without some sense of connection, some sense of belonging. I'm going to talk about that a lot today, sort of the intersection between the students when they feel a sense of connection and belonging and their own agency and engagement. And a lot of the work that I do, teachers, I spend a lot of time talking to teachers about how relationships aren't something we just build in the summer or in the beginning of the school year or the first 3 weeks of the school year so we can get to the hard work of school or the real work of school. That one of the things that I work really hard with folks on to think about is that relationships are the work of school. Learning is a relationship. And teaching is a relationship. So we'll talk today and sort of unpack that together, the sort of multiple ways in which the dynamic of the ways we are with each other plays in how we actually make sense of the world, how we make sense of the content that the students need to grapple with as they develop. And it's sort of fundamentally important as we think about even today. And I think it's one of the things when we think about the pandemic that has been so challenging is it sort of interrupted the ways we think about fostering those relationships, and even the relationship between teaching and learning. So anyway, that's why I think it's so important. We're going to do that today, and I hope that that as we move throughout our time together, folks will feel comfortable enough to push our thinking a little bit and keep going. So let's go to the next slide. And I'll just share with you the goals that I had for today. Really just two. One of the things I want to do with you is together explore that intersection of agency, instruction, and social emotional learning. To think about that together. And I did bring with me some experiences that we might go through together, so that we can make concrete some of the teaching practices that help support this work. So hopefully today you'll be able to leave with some new friends. Hopefully you'll be able to leave with some thinking that you've done that sort of push you in a direction as you think about the teachers you support. And I also hope that you leave with something concrete that you can actually take to somebody else that will help in your work as well. So those are the goals that we've got for today. And so let's go to the next slide. And one of the things I want you to just think about is when you think about integrating academic and social development, what are the challenges that you've seen as teachers at doing that? What are some of the challenges? And feel free right now, we're just going to put in the chat as you think about, just put as many things as you can in the chat around what are some of the challenges around authentically integrating academic and social development. Yeah. A lot of content. I think teachers do feel a lot of stress. And they're under a lot of pressure sometimes to get through lots of stuff, especially as we get in the upper grades and in the high school. I think we sort of struggle with that, and then we worry about the skills kids have. And I'm guessing skills can be academic skills and they can be social emotional skills, right? Yeah, focusing on the content only. Yeah, this whole idea of the weight of SEL, social emotional learning, and just how much do teachers understand about student development and what kids need. Yeah, differentiation. Yeah, thank you, Heather. How do we think about that together in this? Tests, yes. I think teachers feel, I know administrators, school leaders feel the pressure around sort of testing and accountability and whatever, I know you're in different schools in different places, and so that might look different, whether you're accountable to parents, or whether you're accountable to an assessment or a state. All those are pressures. And turnover, yeah. One of the real challenges, of course, is when we have kids coming in and out. And I think it's one of the things you've got in the pandemic. I don't know your specific circumstances. My guess is if you're like lots of places, we've had students coming to school, then we've had to shut down and students are at home. Some of us are just coming back for the first time in a year. And we've got some schools that students may not go back this year, which means you'll have second graders that have been in the school at the most in their whole lives, maybe 7 months next year. You're going to have first graders who have never been in school. Like that these challenges are sort of weighing on us. Yeah. And thank you. The teachers may not themselves feel valued. So this is, you know, I think getting our teeth around this, I think, is important, because what I thought we would do today is actually do an experience. In a second, I'm going to take you through a lesson experience that I've sort of designed to help us think about this. And what I want you to do in this experience is just participate in it. Just you know, go through the things I'm asking you to do as best you can on a Saturday morning. No judgment, and just be yourselves in it. Don't pretend you're students. Don't pretend you're, you know, anything other than yourself. And what I'm going to do with you is a literacy activity that when I'm helping teachers with literacy development, particularly, you know, like this is an activity I typically do with like somewhere between 4th and 6th graders, just so you can get your head around it. And usually we're using a lesson like this to help them think. It's usually a reading activity, and we're helping them think about their own thinking and how they're making sense of text. Without further ado, let's just get into it. And then I think what we'll do afterwards is, when we're done with this activity, we'll get a chance to really debrief it. So I want you to stay in the activity with me as we do it. And then when I pause it, we'll actually do some reflection about some of the teaching issues and some of the other things you notice about the activity. So you can keep maybe a separate little notebook of things you notice about the lesson itself. And I'm going to do it virtually, obviously, with you. This is a lesson I've done virtually with students, but also with in person. And so we can talk about the differences and you know, some of the things you notice. All right. So why don't we go to the next slide? Great. All right. So we're going to take a look at this poem. Hopefully you can all see it. This is a poem by a poet named Jim Daniels. And we're going to read aloud this. I'm going to read aloud this poem to you. You can follow along if you want, or you can close your eyes. I'm going to read it aloud 2 times. And the first time I read it, I just want you to listen to the words. Don't worry about what it means. You know, don't just listen. Speech Class for Joe by Jim Daniels. We were outcasts. You with your stutters, me with my slurring, and that was plenty for a friendship. When we left class to go to the therapist, we hoped they wouldn't laugh. Took turns reminding the teacher, me and Joe have to go to speech class now, or me and Jim have to go to speech now. Mrs. Clark, therapist, was also God, friend, mother. Once she took us to the zoo on a field trip. Aw, you're gonna go look at the monkeys? Maybe they'll teach you how to talk. We clenched teeth and went and felt the sun and fed the animals, and we were a family of broken words. For years, we both tried so hard, and I finally learned where to put my tongue and how to make the sounds, and graduated. But the first time you left class without me, I felt that punch in the gut. I felt like a deserter and wanted you to have my voice. I'm going to read it aloud again, and you're welcome to follow with me silently. I'm just going to read it out loud again. And then I want you to think about what's happening in this poem, just generally. What do we think is happening in this poem? Speech Class for Joe by Jim Daniels. We were outcasts. You with your stutters, me with my slurring, and that was plenty for a friendship. When we left class to go to the therapist, we hoped they wouldn't laugh. Took turns reminding the teacher, me and Joe have to go to speech class now, or me and Jim I have to go to speech now. Mrs. Clark, therapist, was also God, friend, mother. Once, she took us to the zoo on a field trip. Aw, you gonna go look at the monkeys? Maybe they'll teach you how to talk. We clenched teeth and went and felt the sun, fed the animals, and we were a family of broken words. For years, we both tried so hard, and I finally learned where to put my tongue, how to make the sounds, and graduated. But the first time you left class without me, I felt that punch in the gut. I felt like a deserter and wanted you to have my voice. What do we think is happening in this poem? Andrea, can you put folks in partnerships for about a minute and just talk about what do you think is happening in this poem with your partner? Great. So we're all coming back. So we're going to get more time, by the way, to talk about this poem. And we could share the poem again, Andrea, just to share the screen again. Why don't we keep it up there?
Of course.
Great. Perfect. So what are some of the things, what are some of your initial theories about what you think this poem, what's happening in this poem? What are some of the things you talked about? And you can unmute yourselves or put it in the chat.
Well, I have my microphone unmuted, so I'll just jump in. Pero and I, we were talking about the power of words. I mean, the last thing we were saying right before we were pulled back in is that how powerful a writing like that can be to awaken, you know, emotions and connect with what's happening there. And of course, we were also talking about the difficulty of when students are set apart because they have some sort of learning issue, and just being able to find someone that shares that makes you feel less alone. And that's why, you know, the feeling of desertion that he mentioned at the end of the poem. So yeah, we really enjoyed it.
Thank you. In the chat, we had a couple of things. One is just the sense of that it wasn't a safe classroom community came up. I'm wondering, Yilma, do you, when you guys said that, what in the poem, what line in the poem made you think it wasn't a safe community?
Hi, Peter. When they say that they were hoping no one will laugh when they were leaving with the speech therapist.
So in the second stanza, the second line, we hoped they wouldn't laugh.
And another one that we thought it was that they were taking turns to remind the teacher that for us, it's an interpretation of how the teacher was not really paying attention to that need, and they were the ones asking for that support.
So for you both, the second stanza, the second line, we hope they wouldn't laugh, and the third line, took turns reminding the teacher. Those were your clues that made that didn't feel that, you know.
Exactly, having a safe community.
Thank you. Thank you. What's one other idea about what's happening in this poem that you talked about?
I just picked out this sentence right here. We were a family of broken words, because to me that hit home really close. How these two, that sense of belonging to each other, but feeling broken at the same time. And what Gabriela and Pera said, the power of words, right? And these kids, I could feel their pain. And the sentence to me just summarized that, how they felt, feeling broken, yet that belonging to each other kind of rescued it somehow. And that familiar, the feeling of being a family together.
Thank you. I'm going to read the poem aloud again. And this time when I read it aloud, I want you to really be thinking about, what do you think this poem's about? What do you think this poem might be about? And so I'm just going to read it aloud and just think about that. That's that. Speech Class for Joe by Jim Daniels. We were outcasts. You with your stutters, me with my slurring, and that was plenty for a friendship. When we left class to go to the therapist, we hoped they wouldn't laugh. Took turns reminding the teacher, me and Joe have to go to speech class now. Or me and Jim have to go to speech now. Mrs. Clark, therapist, was also a god, friend, mother. Once she took us to the zoo on a field trip. Aw, you gonna go look at the monkeys? Maybe they'll teach you how to talk. We clenched teeth and went and felt the sun and fed the animals, and we were a family of broken words. For years, we both tried so hard, and I finally learned where to put my tongue and how to make the sounds and graduated. But the first time you left class without me, I felt that punch in the gut. I felt like a deserter and wanted you to have my voice. What do you think this poem is about? Just jot down a few ideas silently to yourself. What do you think this poem's about? And what line in here do you think is important to telling you that? And jot that down. So I just put a copy of the poem in the chat. And what I'd like you to do is go to your partnerships. We're going to open up the rooms again. We're going to give you 5 minutes and use the poem. Read it with your partner again. One of you can read it aloud. And then I want you to talk about, what do you think this poem's about and why? And what lines in the poem make you think that? What questions do you have about what we're going to do? Great. Okay, Andrea, when we open them up, and let's give 5, maybe 6 minutes in partnerships to do this work.
Okay, and I'm always keeping the same partners because we discussed
That's right. That's
building
perfect.
up
Yeah.
relationships. Okay, thanks,
Yeah.
Peter, for confirming that.
I got the chance to hear a few of the conversations I jumped into. So what I want to do is just ask, what is a line? You can share the poem again, Andrea?
Of
The
course.
slide. Thank you.
Other.
Okay. What is a line that got you and your partners talking about what you think this poem's about?
Peter, can we share something? It was one of the lines that made us clench our teeth was the one where the therapist, who was godfriend and mother, would then say something so hurtful that it would make them clench their teeth. And Ben and I were saying, well, you know, that's something that sometimes adults lose perspective of how what you say can hurt, you know, the students that she's supposedly trying to help, no? And she said such a hurtful thing. But that was like a side note. We thought that the poem was more about the importance of relationship and the loss, the impact of the loss of a relationship, of a meaningful relationship, I guess. Right, Pera? Did I?
Right.
Leave anything?
We also talked about, I think the last stanza, when he says, I felt that punch in the gut, and I felt like a deserter and wanted you to have my voice. I think it talks about the pain of leaving his friend behind and knowing that his friend would have to go through all of these experiences of having the kids maybe laugh at him when he goes out of class, or maybe, you know, have to clench his teeth at some kind of comment that the therapist or somebody else in the school might say. And he's feeling this pain, and he's feeling that he's wishing that he could give him his voice so that he wouldn't have to go through that alone, because now he's going to be alone without him.
So we've got a couple theories right now what this poem might be about. One is that it's sort of about pain, guilt, I think I heard, and then relationships is another one. Who else? Yeah, what's another idea?
Yeah, I would like to say that it's also about resilience, because even though they were enduring these hardships, trying to succeed in their classes with these speech issues they have or handicaps, well, one of them was resilient, and then he succeeded with, obviously, with the help of his friend, that friendship that was mutual, like a mutual help. And once, as Ms. Pera said, overcame his handicap. Now he is feeling bad about his friend because he's going to be alone. But I think it is also, it speaks about resilience a
Can I,
lot.
can I jump in, Edgar, and say you made me
Yeah.
think about empathy as well, how he had that ability to empathize once he had overcome sort of his impediment or what was keeping him there. And he empathized to the degree where, look, he feels like he's betraying him, right? And he wants to give him his own voice. I mean, how beautiful is that? What a deep sentiment.
Who else, what other group talked about that last paragraph? And what did you say, Heather?
Katie and I talked a lot about it. I shared with her that as a teacher, and even in this group, I have struggled with stuttering with vowels all of my life. And the last thing I was talking about someone else in our group, that when I am nervous or those things, it comes back because processing skills, and how important it is to say, I wanted you to have my voice and to be vulnerable, to tell students instead of the teacher doing that, but to share struggles with your whole group to make that safe space. So I made a impersonal connection, talked about the empathy, and then I shared that friends and colleagues, you know, to this day, that sense of empathy that's there when they want to just help you and come in together, and just kind of, I felt like a deserter, that I think this poem, at least, or it says it's a tribute to Joe. And Katie and I were talking about being on the same page about really sharing struggles with one another, and then thinking back about, you know, people that have been important to us, and maybe using that to make things relevant in various situations.
So why did you guys think, you talked about being for Joe, that tribute almost, what was the clue for you, and why do you think, like, yeah, how do you know that that's what he was doing? What in the poem that tells you that?
Well, I think the last sentence, the last word, lots of it, but yeah. I wanted you to have my voice. It's literally like, I wanted to like give you something. I wanted to do this for you. It's really not about me. I overcame my struggle, and I didn't want you to not have that feeling. I don't know. Yeah.
How do others think the author is feeling at that moment? And why do you think he's doing that?
Well, I think it is also a tribute to his friend, Joe, because maybe he was an important part of his success in this speech class, and he reminded him, no, that's not the word, yeah. He remembers him like a very, very important part in this part of his life. Well, Jim Daniels, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Thank you. Thank you. So one of the things that we don't have here is we don't have Jim Daniels is not one of the people in our Zoom room. So all we have to make sense of this, to decide what we think this poem is mostly about, and why do we think Jim wrote this poem, who we think it's for, what does it make us think about? All we have is really the words on the page. And there's a couple things to remember as readers. One is that in all works, but especially poems, there's nothing here by accident. Nothing appears on this page by accident. It all has a very specific intention to help us as the reader understand what Jim Daniels wants us to feel here. Whether they're exclamation points, or whether it's a N dash or an M dash, or the parentheses around for Joe, or the quotation marks, those are all clues. that you've all paid close attention to. And so it's something as readers we want to do all the time. That we don't, we're going to have to make judgments about what we think this poem's about based on clues that you're using. Like you use the word, I wanted you to have my voice. Some of you talked about that as one of your clues. Some of you talked about in the second stanza, this idea that we hoped they wouldn't laugh, and took turns reminding the teacher about how the kids felt about the room and their relationship in the room. So you're using clues to do that. And so in our reading, this is what we want to do today. And I'm going to pause the lesson. This is what I might do with kids, is if we're talking about, and then they might go to their independent reading now, and I might confer with them and talk about where in their own reading they're making decisions about either characters or place or big ideas based on some of the clues that are in the text. So I'm going to pause for a second. And I'm going to put us back into breakout rooms, and we're going to make sure Edgar is not alone. And what I want you to talk about is, what did you notice about what I did as a facilitator of the lesson? And what did you notice about the structure of the lesson? And what are some of the things you noticed? And then we'll talk about that. What are some of the things you noticed about the lesson? What did you guys talk about?
Peter, I'm going to say something because it kind of made me laugh, but I was telling Peter that I was so into the activity that I stopped paying attention to what you were doing. So Peter was saying, well, what was it exactly? She helped me think about it. What was it exactly that made me get into the activity? And we all agreed, Edgar, Peter, and I, that it was a question of us getting involved actively in the thinking process and the discussing, and because you kept sending us back, it wasn't just for a little bit. It's like this constant being able to talk about it. So it becomes more about your process than what maybe you were doing. So.
Thank you. What did others talk about?
Well, Mariela and I started talking. It was an accident. I was going to go to the very concrete on the waiting time and the clear instructions, but it was an accident that we said, have you noticed the time? And we said that how when it's something really meaningful, and when you take the time to make deep understanding and deep and having intentionally building relationships and giving people the chance to be heard, to talk, and to learn how to listen to the other person, when you have those meaningful experiences, it's a lot easier to build knowledge from there. Mm. You want to compliment me?
Very important. I was with Hilma that it was just yesterday that, again, we were discussing about we never have time for everything, and like we tend to rush. And the material that we have in both programs, being a reader and making meaning, are wonderful, but we're like, time is never enough. But this thing that you said about paying attention to quotation marks and punctuation, I mean, it was such a beautiful way to bring language arts, and then we have to find it work like that, and then it becomes meaningful, no? And the learning stays forever. You understand why quotation marks, why this and the other. So I'm super grateful, really.
Thank you. Yeah. Why don't we put up the next slide, Andrea? And one of the things that you noticed that one of the things I want to sort of highlight are one of the things that happens for kids, next one, please, is that, we want them to sort of lose time, right? We want them to not sort of be worried too much about the clock, about when lunch is coming, when recess is, or whatever it is that's coming next, and just to get into the moment. And I'm going to be talking about sort of the moment, because I think the moment's really important in school, the present moment. Because I think as teachers, we're often worried about what came before, what's coming after, and we're juggling so many things that it's hard to stay in the moment. And I think it's true for kids. How do we create learning experiences so that kids are sort of just in the moment? They're just engaged. and engagement and agency are something I want to think about with you right now. And I think there are some very specific things that I tried to do in this lesson that I'll sort of try to bring out, and hopefully you noticed, some of you may not have noticed, that help with kids doing that. They're actual specific moves that teachers can make to do that. Some of them are on here. And I'll talk a little bit about why they're so important. All these sort of come out of really sound research practices, right? We've lots of good, thoughtful, smart people have thought deeply about things teachers can do to maximize student participation, voice, and engagement. And all of them, by the way, are designed so that students do the work of the lesson and not the teacher. One of the things that I would encourage you to look at when you visit your classrooms is who's shouldering the responsibility of the hard work. In many classrooms that I watch, in many classrooms of really good schools, it's shocking, actually, the amount of lifting teachers are doing for kids inadvertently. They're not trying to do it, but it's in the way of the lesson. It's in the very structure of the way that they phrase questions, the way they give worksheets or graphic organizers, the way that they use texts. All of those can be done in ways where teachers are actually doing a great deal of thinking for kids, and they're actually reducing what we're expecting them to do with it. So in this activity that we just did, one of the things that I tried to do was present the poem and ask an open-ended question. What do you think's happening in this poem? That's it. And by asking open-ended questions, the idea is that the expectation is that there are many answers here. Kids get freaked out when they think there's one answer, right? And it shuts down thinking and engagement when we ask a closed-ended question where there is just an answer. Like a closed-ended question might be, who are the two characters in this, right? That's a closed-ended question. It's a very low-level question versus how do we think the two characters were feeling in this poem, and what evidence do we have that tells us that? Both that question is an open-ended question. There's lots of ways they could be feeling, and there's lots of things you said actually that the characters were feeling. And so one of the things we want to think about when we think about time is how much time in a classroom do we want kids spending on closed-ended questions versus open-ended questions and open-ended activities? We don't have all day. And so if I'm constantly trying to make sure that kids got the 6 things out of this thing, that's different than having them grapple with some of the essential questions of the text. And we've got to weigh that as teachers, right? Because sometimes the details are important. So that might be my objective for today, but let's not muddy it by trying to do both. Or conversely, I might say, if I only have 30 minutes, let's make sure it's centered on the big thing, the most essential thing, the thing that's going to get my kids engaged in the work of the lesson. The other thing that you'll notice is that by doing it that way, the level of the text is less important in this case than the work kids are doing with it. So I might, if you'll notice, I read aloud that poem 3 or 4 times. You read it aloud with your partner once. If, for instance, you had students who that would have been a hard thing for them to read, giving them access to it by me reading it aloud first, them reading it aloud together, gives kids lots of opportunities to engage with the text and not make some of their struggles that they have get in the way of the deep thinking we want them to do with it. They're going to do their reading work in a text that's at their appropriate level when we have to do it, right? When they need eyes on text, I can do that with them. But this is about meaning making. These are about things, about habits of mind we want readers to have as a reader. These are about reading comprehension strategies. Those things all readers need, and we want to have it. If we're going to do it as a whole group, we want to make sure all kids can access it. So if this lesson is in English, for instance, and I've got students who might struggle with that poem because of the English or the syntax or the vocabulary that's in it, I might need to read it lots of times before they might feel comfortable engaging with it in a way that other students might, who are more fluid in English. That's just one example. Could be just the level of the text. It could be the background knowledge that they need. Whatever it is that giving them multiple ways into the text are certainly important. And I tried to use things like wait time, where we know that, for instance, when you look at the research, when I wrote one of my books, one of the pieces of research I came across was by a husband and wife team called Myra and David Sadker. They wrote a book called Failing at Fairness. And one of the things that they researched was, among many, many things, about how equitable schools were in teaching practices. And one of the things they looked at was talk time. And one of the things they noticed was that the time between when a teacher stopped her question and called on the first student was shocking. Just in your head, think, how quickly do teachers call on the first student so if I say, who do you think's the main character? And then I'm waiting for you, like, how quickly do you think just put in the chat, like, how quickly do you think teachers call on that first? Five seconds. What else? What's another idea? 1 second. It's under under a quarter second. I mean, literally, it's instantaneous. That's across classrooms, right? So the reason why that's insidious is that we found that there's a massive gender difference between who raises their hand first. That in those classrooms where teachers were calling quickly, they were calling most often on boys. Boys raise their hands faster than girls because boys will raise their hand even if they don't have an answer yet. Even if they don't. So you've seen this, right? You've seen a kid and then you call on them, especially like a little 5 or 6 year old, and then they think of their answer, right? So by giving kids wait time, you're just giving everyone a chance to think about their answer. And then, and it's easier on Zoom, right? It's easier on Zoom because there's a little delay naturally. But in a physical classroom, this is super important. I could go spend a lot of time on all of these things, like responding neutrally, or how important it is that we don't let kids in on what we think the right answer is. Like, for instance, in this poem, if I'd have said, what do we think this poem is mostly about? And I thought this poem was all about guilt. I thought that this poem, as a teacher, let's say I thought this poem was really, it's about Joe and Joe's feeling of like he abandoned his friend and he's an adult now. Like, and I've thought about this poem, and I've spent, maybe 2 years teaching this poem, right? So I want you to, so as soon as you tell me this poem is about relationships, friendship, I might say, yeah, kind of. Who's got another answer? Or close, right? You've seen teachers do that because you're trying to get kids to the answer you want them to give so you can move on to the next thing. And when kids want to be right. So they recognize when I'm doing that, and they're looking for praise. They're looking for little hints like, am I right or am I wrong? And so what I did is I just said, thank you. I said, thank you. Every time you gave a response, I tried to say thank you. And I try to do the same for everyone, because I don't actually care what your answer is. What I care is why you're giving me that answer. Because that is the beauty in this. There's a woman, she's now professor emeritus at Harvard. Her name is Eleanor Duckworth. If you're a science educator or a math educator, you've probably read her work. She was a student of Piaget's. But she wrote a book called The Having of Wonderful Ideas. She's just a phenomenal writer. And she writes this thing about the virtues of not knowing. Or virtues and what she says is the right answer is often overrated, because we don't know when someone gives you a right answer whether or not the student guessed, whether they knew that answer before they came into your classroom, or whether it was a triumph of imagination, whether they did a whole lot of hard work to get that answer. And so it's the line when I said to you, what in the poem made you think that? And your answer there is what I really cared about. even if I would have disagreed, let's say I didn't think that's actually what's happening in that line. And actually, I'm a teacher. I have a lot more experience than you. I've read this poem probably 300 times. I've done it with lots of adults. Like, I have a whole different way I think about this poem than you naturally would. If I bring that to this, I immediately shut down your ability to engage with it, because you're waiting for me to tell you, as I'm the omniscient teacher, right? And I think that's the dynamic that we're trying to break down, because when we want to give kids agency and engagement in classrooms, they've got to feel like their ideas matter. And the way we do that is through the subtle ways that we teach with them. And so these are some of the things that we try to do. Why don't we do this? Can you go back like maybe 3 slides, 2 slides ahead? Not that one, not that one, not that one. This, no, next one. Nope, sorry. One more. Yes, all right. This is something I've been thinking a lot about when I think of like, how do we think about helping kids engage? How do we help kids? Because in this lesson that you just saw, if I were to ask you, what kind of social skills do kids need to be successful in this lesson? You just said things like, they need to be able to share ideas. They need to be able to look at their partner or navigate Zoom. So they need to feel safe enough so their partner feels like they heard. They might, in some places, someone might, in partner, they might not have their camera on in a whole group like this, but we want them to turn it on maybe in a partner chat and feel safe enough to be able to do that if they're on Zoom, so that they can actually have a dialogue with their partner. But that means that they have to have a lot of trust, because kids, as you've probably been struggling with, don't always want to turn on their cameras when they're at home, for lots of reasons. And so we can make them. I know schools that have actually legislated that, but that's different than having them want to do it and feel comfortable doing it. And it impacts how they're going to interact with their partner or with you, depending on how they're engaging with that. And the same thing, we bring them back to class, right? Our kids that we want to talk a lot and to engage, want to give them those opportunities to do that. And so I've been thinking a lot about, what does it mean for a teacher to set up herself so that she can be in a classroom where this happens? And I've been thinking about this thing called teacher stance. And this is what I've been writing a lot about lately. And I'm going to sort of, and I know, a lot of you were sort of right at 10 o'clock. And so I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes talking about this, and then I'll just open it up for some questions. And this comes from my work, actually, both watching over the last, my daughter's for college freshman now. And one of the things I've got a chance to watch her is both in music, as a sort of, I've got a piano, violin behind me and a guitar. So we do lots of music in our house. And I've also coached, I've coached many years and still continue to play, even in my 50s now, soccer or football. And I thought a lot about how do we help kids be good at those two things, both in music and sports. And it's helped me be a better teacher and think about this idea of teacher stance. And I'll give you an example. When we work with young kids in soccer, one of the things that's really hard for a goalkeeper is to be fully present. So sometimes the game is all the way at the other end of the field, right? And they may only touch the ball twice. And if they miss the ball, their team might lose. And there's 2 chances that they touch the ball. And so one of the things we try to do is to work on their physical stance, but also they have to work on their mental stance. How do they stay engaged fully for 90 minutes in a match? When the ball is passed to a defender, the defender has a bunch of decisions to make, right? They've got to know this idea of space and think about where they're going to pass a ball. They might think about the position of the person they're playing against and what side of the foot they want to hold the ball at as they protect it or as they pass it to somebody else. They're thinking about all these kinds of things. So in teacher, one of the things I'm thinking about is how do we help our teachers pay attention to what their physical stance says about and what message it conveys to kids. Like right now, you can look at me and you look in my camera. I am filling the screen. My eyes are looking right at you. I have a look of engagement. I have a look like I want you to pay attention. I think this is important. I could be like this. Right? This sends a different message, right? This is a different body language. This is a more casual thing, right? This says we're just playing around here. This isn't as serious. And I think teachers, when they sit on the carpet, they have a physical stance for how, when they're reading this poem, how are they sitting? What message is that conveying to kids? Do they have a notebook? And are they like this? And do kids get the feeling that their words matter and that the ideas that we're battering about are important? Or is the teacher, they have their book, this is their teacher's manual, and they're like this, and they're just going through it. Like whatever's on that page is coming out of their mouth, and this is the train we're on, right? So these subtle messages actually impact how kids behave in classrooms. But teachers, in order to have a physical stance, need a mental stance as well. They have to be fully present. I talked earlier about, look, I'm at home right now. I can hear in the rest of this house that my daughter woke up, coffee has been made, someone knocked at the door. There's lots of distractions here. The cat scratching wants to get in. I've got one of my friends was calling, trying to get a hold of me. Like these are real distractions that I have right now as I'm trying to talk to you. And if I'm going to be here for you, if I'm going to make this experience good and useful, then I can't ignore those. I have to ignore those things, and I have to be sort of in this moment for you. In 5 minutes, when we're done, I can call my friend and I can go see, and I can go get another cup of coffee and I can see who's at the door, right? But that's a decision we have to make. And I think teachers feel like they've got to always multitask. They're worried about the faculty meeting at the end of the day. They're worrying about the parent email they've got to respond to. They're angry at their child for not getting out of the house in the morning. They may be mad at their spouse for a fight they had the night before. Like these are the things that we have, right? That in our real lives that impact how we at present we can be for kids. And so what I want to talk to teachers about is you can't be on all day long. So when I'm facilitating this with you, this has to be all I care about, and you have to believe that that's all I care about, because then you can be more present here with me today. And that's true for kids. And so these are some of the things on this slide here that I think a lot about. And the only, and a lot of them are pretty self-evident, of the messages they convey. But the only one I'm going to sort of highlight is this idea of being a co-learner. And to develop a sense of wonder about what students are saying and doing. We often, as I said earlier, really value an answer that kids are giving because we've got so much on our plates, we've got to get through this. But when I shift my thinking to valuing engagement, to valuing thinking, I want to know why you believe what you believe. We ratchet up the rigor in a classroom exponentially because kids learn that the currency of this room is ideas. Ideas matter. And being wrong with your idea is as important as being right. Because we can't figure out what this poem is about unless we have a lot of theories about what it's not about. And we've got to get them all out. And the kids need to know, like, it's okay. Like, this, by the way, requires practice because they want to be right. They want to get the right answer. They want a pat on the back. We all do. But where the learning comes from is being wrong. The learning comes from struggling through it. Like a lot of false starts, a lot of like going down some rabbit holes that aren't going to get, and then we realize where the right one is or the right few are. And that is where engagement happens. That's where engagement happens. And so what I work most often with teachers on is developing that sense of wonder. And so as your students come back, I know a lot of you have got teachers coming back, and everyone's going to be excited. Everyone is, everyone's probably going to be stressed and overworked, and they've got all the distancing things you got to have in, like it's going to feel chaotic. Yet it's now more important than ever that kids get the feeling that A, they're welcome, B, this is where we belong, and C, that this work matters. And it won't take long. It didn't take long this morning for it to happen with you all. Kids are absolutely no different. They will know in the minute they walk into a well-organized classroom that's centered around their thinking, they'll fall right into that. And if it's not set up for that, you'll know as well. Because any of you that are administrators, you'll be dealing with that. So this is what I think a lot about. This is where I think the intersection of academic and social development are. It's in lessons, it's in the work. It doesn't have to be extra lessons. It can be, at the end of this lesson today, I could say, how was it working with your partner today? What was hard about that? What are we gonna do differently tomorrow? Like, you might have gotten to a room where the partner didn't talk, where one partner did all the talking, where you talked about something that wasn't the poem. Like, those are all important, and they're all important that we bring out. And I don't want a kid to feel like they're calling each other out. I want them to say, yeah, we didn't even talk about the poem. Well, why not? How can we make sure the next time you go into your partner chat that you do? So I've done a lot of talking for the last 20 minutes, and I know some of you may have to go, but I do want to open it up to say, what questions do folks have about what we said so far, and what does this make you think about?
One immediate question that pops in my mind, you kept talking about the teacher's full attention and being fully present and conveying that message through the body language. What do we do with our kids then? I mean, if we're there present, and of course they would fall into place by having us be present for them. These kids that have that dispersed attention, and I'm talking about being through the screen, right?
Yeah.
It makes even more challenging, Peter. And I kept thinking about that kid who would always be, having a hard time just making the decision to ignore those stimulus around them.
So, let's take it from a couple of different perspectives. Like, if it's a whole class and their job is to listen, I think we need to honor the fact that some kids are listening when they're not looking right at me. Some kids could be playing with their shoe and listening to me. Right? It is absolutely true. Same thing can happen on Zoom. So one is that I don't always want to assume that kids aren't listening because it doesn't look like they're glued, because I've seen kids glued to me that are not, like they just know that that's the behavior that I'm looking for, but they are not with me. Like they're still, they can still be in la la land, right? So let's not, so the physical behavior is important, but it's not everything. It's both. It's the physical and the mental together that matters. And I would argue that in a whole group setting, it's less important than, it's important for the teacher to convey to the class. But the students, they're going to be in different places. When they get in their partnership, I do have conversations with kids about, how do you show your partner you're listening? What are ways we do that? And your community norms can talk about that. Like some communities, they say, some kids say, well, it's look, in some environments, it's not okay for a child to look an adult in the eye. Like that's not appropriate. That's disrespectful in some places. Well, let's honor that, right? Let's not expect something that's disrespectful in the community that we're living in. But we all have mores and norms around how do we convey to each other we care and we're listening. And we just want to talk about it. Let's make a list of it. Let's make a chart. Let's practice it. Over the year, we can get better at it. And as a teacher, I don't want to expect that my students come in knowing how to do that. Some will, but it's a new group of kids. It's always new each year. They're coming from Zoom now back in the classroom. Let's give them some grace and recognize it's not going to look pretty today, but it should look pretty in 3 weeks, right? In 3 weeks, it's going to look better. But it's only going to work better if we're taking the baby steps. So it's only work better if today, if I say, okay, everyone, let's just practice coming to the rug today. We've got to stay 6 feet apart. It's going to feel different. So let's just practice it a few times. Like that's today's work. And let's expect that we need some kids to make mistakes when they do it so we can figure out the right way to do it, like traffic patterns, like can we all run at once? Can, you know, whatever it is that we need to practice so that we can get to become a well-oiled machine. And I think that's super, super important. What other questions came up for you or comments?
Thanks, Peter.
Well, I know folks have got to run. We've went over our time. So yeah, Maria.
Very quickly, I know that you are somehow a step ahead. I mean, of course, in the United States and same in Mexico, no? We're not coming back right away, but we have to start planning and we have to have everything ready. And I have been looking for sort of like a guideline, because now that you mentioned the rugs, no, and so on, of course, we do need to make a lot of changes in, when we come back, no, in the classrooms and so on. But that is something that we are craving for, like some kind of direction of like how we can, come back to what we used to do, but in this new reality, as we call it in Mexico. But I haven't been able to, I don't know if you already have something that we can actually start looking into in terms of how the programs work, no? Because they work beautifully, but now we don't know of how, of course, you were saying we don't have enough space, so then probably we have to work outside. So that is a big need that we have.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of things. There isn't a right way to do this. We had some support for when folks went virtual because everyone was sort of in the same boat, and so it was easier to. But I'll give you some examples. Like depending on certain communities, even here, it's some places 6 feet, some places it's 3 feet. Some places allow more kids in a room if the door is open and there's ventilation. Some you have to be all outside. Like I think your community is sort of, how your community decides it's going to open your school is going to sort of dictate some of that. I've got some rooms who don't go on the rug right now. There is no rug time. They do it from their seats because that's just that's the only way it's possible. So I don't want anyone, I think it's important as we send the message, we're just going to do the best we can right now. That what's important is that kids get a chance to talk to each other. They get a chance to talk and engage, and we can still honor some of that, recognizing that some of the distances can be different. Like I was just talking to a teacher last night who didn't think that kids could turn to a partner because they're going to be so far away. But when she did it, turned out they could. They just turned to the next desk. It was a little louder, but it actually worked. So I think just to practice. And then the other thing is when they do, to have a faculty meeting where we share out like what worked and what didn't work and what am I struggling with? Because I think in that, that's really a place where I think, teachers will find really thoughtful answers that it's just important to share and recognize there isn't a right way to do it. And it, it'd be great if we could go back to, the way it was, but that's just not possible.
Those are really great answers that inspire confidence, Peter, as we venture into the, unknown and just feeling good about being able to try stuff out, trial and error. There's no right way to do it, and having that empathy, right, with our community and our needs. Thank you for reminding of that being the essential thing to keep in mind as we go forward.
Yeah. So that's really all I have for you today. And thank you sorry we went a little over, but I hope it was
well worth it.
Stay. Yeah.
Gabriela, you want to make some closing remarks to the people in the community in our forum?
Yeah. Well, we're gonna finish up reminding you, we're gonna, Easter break and oh my gosh, Holy Week spring break is going to be coming up. So we're not gonna meet until April 17th. And we're gonna have an amazing session planned with Jill Akers and Amaris from Colombia. And they're gonna be talking about how to keep the balance, which is something I think we are all concerned about. So we'll share that information with you in the chat, and just thank everyone for coming. It was just lovely to see all of you, and we're coming up to a year, almost our first anniversary of having the forum done. So I think we should plan something special, right, Andrea? And well, we'll just keep in touch through the chat.